Hello, welcome to yesterday's airlines, and in this video we're going to be taking a look belatedly at the Phoenix October announcements. And I apologise that this video is coming so late, but last week, as most of you hopefully know, I spent the entire week working on the ngmodels MD80 samples, and I just didn't have time to create this video, so apologies for that. These Phoenix announcements did come out probably about a week and a little bit ago. They came out about the same sort of time that several others did that I did get videos out for, and that's a shame because obviously none of those releases were particularly exciting if you watch the videos, but this set of releases from Phoenix continues what is a fine year for them, and actually is probably of the jcwings, Gemini, ngmodels and Phoenix, it is the Phoenix announcements here which are by far and away the most interesting in my opinion. So let's get on and check out what is actually quite a large month for Phoenix. There are 18 models in this batch. Before we do that though, obviously got to ask you guys to chuck a like on the video if you're enjoying the content, and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate that. Check me out at Yester Airlines on Instagram and obviously on Facebook. Tons of new content coming up at the site as always, samples, reviews, all that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out. But let's get on and check out what Phoenix are going to be bringing us in October. Well, I say October, but actually Phoenix have been taking a little while to get their models out. Usually it's at least a couple of months before they get their models out. I'm still waiting on an American Airlines 767 from, I think it was August. So it's at least 2 months, maybe slightly more in some markets, which is a little bit annoying, but hey, it is the way it is. Okay, let's get on with the video and see what I think. So we're starting out with the Airbuses, as I am usually doing, and there are, I think, 5 Airbuses this month, beginning with an Air Canada Airbus A320. The registration is C Foxtrot November Victor Victor, and this aircraft is unusual in that it's wearing this all black version of the scheme, and I think it's actually flown by Air Canada Jets, which is the sports charter side of the business. But regardless, the scheme is quite impressive, being all black with just the Air Canada maple leaf on the tail and lower fuselage. Really quite nice. And it has not been made by anybody else to date in 400 scale. In fact, this is the first time that Phoenix themselves are making an Air Canada A320. They have never done so before. The vast majority of the 13 other models have been made by Aero Classics, with only 1 Gemini and 3 Dragons and a Panda getting in the way. But no one's made this scheme, and it is really nice. I have to say though that the Phoenix A320 is pretty ordinary, and that's going to drag this one down. In fact, I'm going to put this one into workhorse, which may be a little bit harsh, but the mould isn't that good. And I'd much rather be getting this from anyone else that's not jcwings anyway, because their A320 mould is equally not very good. And in fact, it wouldn't surprise me if we did see this coming out from Panda or NG or somebody else in the near future. Moving on, and we're off to Belgium for Brussels Airlines, and we've got a couple of Brussels Airlines Airbuses here. Now, Brussels Airlines, which was SN Brussels beforehand, they've got this dreadful livery they've introduced now. It's just a bundle of dots. What does that say about Belgium, except that we've got no taste? Really unattractive livery. Not that that is an issue with the model being made. The first aircraft up is an A320neo. It's OOSB Alpha. I assume that is the first A320neo for Brussels Airlines. But it kind of looks like the aircraft's got measles, to be honest. It's got so many spots. I really don't like it. And again, the scheme isn't particularly, or the mould, sorry, isn't particularly good. The A320neo, it's okay, but got the same issues that the standard CEO does. So again, I'm going to put this one into workhorse, partly because I just distaste for the livery and partly because the mould isn't spectacular. The other aircraft is an A330-300. This one is 00SFX, and the livery obviously is the same, that same livery. It looks actually slightly better on a bigger aircraft like the A330, but still, come on, it's just a dreadful, dreadful scheme. Don't know what they're thinking. I'm going to put both of these in workhorse. And again, this is harsh, and especially because nobody else has made that A320 to date. Though again, I imagine it will be coming. jcwings have announced the A330, but haven't released it yet. And in that case, I'd say the Phoenix version is probably your better bet if you really care. But I just can't believe there's that much interest in Brussels Airlines. I could be wrong, but anyway, I don't feel like I'm going to put these into high flyer, though perhaps, arguably, the A330 at least could be. Next up is a China Eastern A340-600. Now, this one is registered B6050, and it's far and away not the first time they've released one. They have released 5 other China Eastern A340-600s, 2 of which, have been in the standard colours, which this one comes in, the old standard colours, that is, anyway. But amazingly, somehow, even though I collect Chinese airliners, I've never picked one of these up. So this one is looking oddly interesting. So usually I'd workhorse this because even though the mould is excellent, the Phoenix A340-600 is a really good mould. It has been made twice before in exactly these colours. The last time it was made was perhaps a few years ago. It was 2011. In fact, that's a long time ago, isn't it? But yeah, I've never picked one up. Interesting. So I think I probably will get this. And in fact, because of my purely selfish interest in this, I think I'm going to put this one up in the high flyer. So maybe controversial that I've workhorsed those Brussels and I'm high flying as China Eastern, but that's kind of my thoughts on this. And we finish off the Airbuses with an A350-1000 in the colours of Virgin Atlantic. The aircraft is registered GVR November Bravo. That reg has not been made before. And what's interesting about the aircraft actually is that it's got this white nose cone going on. I'm not sure why, but it does. And so it's different to the previous reg that was made by Phoenix, which was GVPRD, which was just in the standard scheme. And that was made in 2020. So it's been a few years since they've produced one anyway. I have to say that Phoenix tend to make the Virgin micaceous colours just a kind of blanket grey, which doesn't look as good as has been achieved by NG or Aviation 400, but nobody else has made this particular example with the white nose cone, which is quite interesting. I'm not an enormous fan of the Virgin A350, the A350 by Phoenix, but the previous release didn't look that bad, though perhaps it's just the angle of the photograph which is making it look better than it is. I'm tempted to high fly this one. I'm tempted to high flyer it. I think I will. Perhaps these scores are a little unusual for me this month so far. But I'm going to high fly that one. But much like the Brussels A330, I think it's straight on the line. It could easily be workhorse, and the Brussels A330 could easily be high flyer. But hey, got to put it somewhere. Okay, cool. Now that is the Airbus portion of the release set. So we're moving on into the Boeings, which make up the bulk of the rest, but not all. There is a single 737 this month. It's a MAX 8. The registration is GTUMF, and it is in the colours of TUI Airways. I've gone on record previously for saying that I'm not a big fan of the Phoenix MAX 8. Just something about it doesn't come together well, and it certainly is inferior to the JC Gemini MAX 8 and the ngmodels MAX 8 by quite a long distance. But nobody else has made a TUI MAX 8 before, aside from Phoenix themselves. They made TUMA, and they made that in 2019. So this is the second time they've produced effectively this aircraft. It's not thrilling me. But it's not dreadful. I'm going to workhorse it. I know previously I have been quite harsh on the Phoenix MAX 8, but looking at the pictures again of that previous release, it's not as awful as it could be, and at least they can print the cockpit on their MAX 8. So yeah, rather than gas guzzler it this time round, I think I will put it into workhorse. Okay, now Phoenix this month have produced more models than they usually do on a monthly basis, and 4 of those are 747 classics. And it continues this vein of Phoenix making exceptional 747 choices with really, really poor molds. It's really disappointing. So the 4 we've got this month is an Aer Lingus 747-100, a Lufthansa 747-100 with the cheat line, and a pair of Swissair Series 200s with the chocolate stripes. There's not a lot to say. I've said so much about these 747s. I'm going to keep on giving them dreadful scores in these videos because they really are very poor. I appreciate that Phoenix are making such interesting liveries, but I really cannot appreciate what they're doing them on. And they know the mold's dreadful, but they're just not really interested in modifying their molds dramatically. So there's not a lot to say. I'm not going to get upset about it. I'm sure they'll sell. People like them, but I do see a lot of people saying, yeah, even so, I'm not going to buy them because they're just not good enough. And I am definitely in that category. I'm not going near them, even though it may be years before there are alternatives. I'm still not going to buy these. So I'm just going to stick all of these in scrap metal and let's move on to something more interesting, because the back end of this release set actually is probably the most interesting portion, where Phoenix are working with a couple of their better molds and producing some more interesting options. And there are 4 767-300s this month, all of which are interesting actually. And we start off with N395AN, and this is in American Airlines One World colours. It's the previous AA tail on it, not the existing one. And when you look at what's been made for American 767s, there has been a One World 763 before, but it's in the current scheme, not the previous. So this is the first time this has been made. That makes it a really good choice, and definitely one that we should be complimenting, I guess, Phoenix for producing. The other aircraft is N396AN, and this one is in the standard colours, not the existing colours, the red, white and blues of Vignelli colours from the 90s, well, from the 60s really, all the way through to into the 2000s. And this one has got the winglets on it, unlike the release which I'm waiting for, which doesn't have the winglets. So both really interesting. I should point out that in terms of this second model with the winglets, it says it's been made once before, and that was by Gemini, but that was such a long time ago, 2010. But what is interesting is at that period, Gemini were using the Phoenix 767 and 300 mold. So it's interesting, you look at the old version, which was N399AN, and basically see exactly the same aircraft you're going to be getting now from Phoenix, because nothing's changed with the mold, except that they've added aerials onto it. It looks good. The Phoenix 767 is good. And yeah, both are really nice. And you've got to say here that these are both really impressive. So I'm going to put the standard scheme version up into High Flyer. It's been a long time since it's been made before, but it has been made before. I think that it will still sell really well. I'm going to put the One World version up into Supersonic, because that has never been made before with this tail, and again, I think it'll sell well and be a really nice model. So pair of really nice 767-300s there. Good choices. The next 767-300 is Ukrainian. It's Ukraine International. URGED is the reg. And there hadn't been, until recently, much in the way of Ukrainian releases, but now this will be the 6th in 400 scale, and there's been quite a decent selection. We've had not a particularly good Series 800 737 from Gemini, admittedly, but then we've had a very nice 777 from jcwings and a pair of 737-200s from Aero Classics. Nobody's made a 767-300 before, so again, this is a really good choice, and nice mold, nice scheme, good relevance, and I'm going to put this one up into Supersonic as well. And the last 767 is back to the States. It's United Airlines, it's Battleship Grey, N666UA is the reg. And when I look back through the long list of 767-300s made for United, of which there have been 15 others, there's only 2 which are wearing the scheme, and they're both incredibly old. One is by Dragon and one is by Gemini, and the newer of the pair is from 2004. So really, really old and on inferior molds. So another really good choice, another great selection here, and I think this one is one that is tempting me quite a lot. I'm going to put this one up supersonic as well, actually. I think it's got a really good chance of selling well. I think it's going to be very welcome. It is interesting that there have been so many other 767s announced recently. ngmodels have announced them, and Panda have too. But I don't think this is a reaction to that. I think this is just what Phoenix are doing, and they've been taking advice from collectors who have made some good choices here. And yeah, I don't see any reason not to be interested in these. Now, before we get on to some really interesting fare, the last Boeing is a 787. It's Iraqi Airways. The reg is YI-ATC. It's the same aircraft which was announced by jcwings. It's one of their future releases. Hasn't come out yet. I'd probably just wait for the JC, the Phoenix 787. Not the best mold. Very old. And I'm going to put this one into workhorse, I think, mainly for that reason. Not because Iraqi Airways is a bad choice, but just because the mold is dragging that down. So that brings us to the last pair of models, and my collector friend Dan Tung has been working with Phoenix to suggest some really nice releases for them, and he's come up with a couple of golden TU-154s for this month. Now, I did review the recent Crass Air release from Phoenix, and to be honest, it didn't review that well, mainly because the mold is so old and it's relatively obsolete. But it's not a bad mold, it's just not a great TU-154M in detail. But in general, it looks quite good, and given NG's continuing inability to use their mold correctly, it's one that I'm still willing to buy, especially when such excellent suggestions are being made for the releases. So what we have here are a pair of really unusual and interesting 154s. We start with Mongolian Airlines MIAT. The reg is MPR 85644, and the scheme is quite a complex cheat line scheme, kind of in your face. Big red reg on the engines, and it's interesting. It's really interesting. I haven't got any other Mongolian aircraft. I did have the NG 787, but I sold it. All the other Mongolian releases have been of modern aircraft in the current scheme, which is really nice with the flying Pegasus on, but nothing that's old like this. And this is, you know, really cool scheme and aircraft. The sort of thing that really gets me interested in collecting, even though the mold itself is a little bit old and decrepit. So yeah, I'm going to put this one up into supersonic. Perhaps some bias showing there. Maybe I shouldn't be supersonicking this mold, but it's really interesting. And the other aircraft that is announced on the 154 is Slovak Airlines OM AAA, and again a really excellent choice. Slovak Airlines had, or has, I can't remember if they're still around, I don't think they are, has a really interesting livery. Even though it's Euro white, it looks quite modern, but at the same time it's super nice. So a really good choice. And yeah, again, it's an interesting country. I don't think there's been any other Slovak releases. Obviously there's been CSA when it was Czechoslovak, but nothing that's just Slovakian, I don't believe. And another one which I'm really tempted to get, even though the mold itself is quite weak, because who knows when someone else is going to make this unusual airline. So again, I'm going to put that in high flyer because of the interest factor that comes with the airline, which means that we've got almost an unprecedented number of high flyers this month for a Phoenix release set. 3 of those 767s and the pair of 154s, and perhaps I'm being a little generous, but then again, some people in there say that I'm being incredibly ungenerous about the 747, so perhaps it evens itself out. Certainly, it's unusual for me to look at a Phoenix release set, even quite a large one like this, and see at least 4 models which I'm seriously considering getting. So, yeah, Phoenix definitely doing something right. Still doing things wrong, but doing lots of stuff right as well. And for all those people who think I hate Phoenix, this illustrates that that's not the case. It just depends on what molds they're using and what they're releasing, and they certainly have been releasing some interesting models in 2023. Okay, that's it for this video. But for now, thank you very much for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.